Welcome to Dongle Madness. Finally, I have the time to finish off this review of Cayin RU7, the latest flagship dongle from Cayin. And in fact, this is the only third R2R based dongle released since RU6, and in fact, the second one being Hibi FC6. So now we have RU7. So what's the deal with these RU7s? First, let's just have a look at the pricing itself. Okay, as can be seen here, this is looking at Hi-Fi Go. They have it in stock. In fact, the price is listed at 290 US dollar, I would say. And in fact, judging by that price alone, it is definitely similar to how RU6 was released almost like over a year ago, almost 2 years in fact. Yeah, over a year ago. And this is definitely top of the range dongle that you can expect from market among a few of them. And if you are in Malaysia, the good news is that my favorite audio store locally, Red Ape Audio, also have it in stock now, and it is priced at just 1,299. Okay, so let's just have a look at the build itself. I have already actually shown this, especially if you have seen my unboxing video, which was almost like over 2 weeks ago. And I will not spend too much time showing the contents of this box and everything, but I'll just like to highlight on a few things what I love about this RU7 physical wise. Okay, first, you have a look at this interface here, the USB type C here. Okay, this is amazingly premium looking. I have not seen anything like this in any dongle which I have owned, over 140 dongle, and this is definitely looking very premium and very solid. Okay, very convincing. And the same goes for this both 4.4 mm balance and this 3.5 mm single ended. Aesthetically, I would say that, in terms of dimension, it's just pretty much similar to RU6, in fact. But the good thing is that it's a bit more ergonomic now with some, let's say, beveling here at the back here, especially, giving it a bit of impression of being a bit sleeker and, in fact, a bit concave, and holding it definitely on the build itself alone would already justify the price being asked. And of course, we have here LED indicator. Okay, so that's pretty much on the physical side of it. So now, most importantly, let's just have a look at the specification itself. Okay, so as you can see on screen right now, I have actually put side by side the most important details about this RU7. If you want to have a bit more of full details, you can always go to Cayin website and go to the specs page there. There's tons of details there, okay? All right, but not gonna go through them because I'm just gonna highlight what is important. All right, so let's just have a look at the chipset itself. As I mentioned earlier, this is another R2R resistor ladder DAC, okay, which means that this is not delta sigma, as simple as that. Okay, and the main difference which RU7 offer right now is that if you compare with RU6, it now has 128 resistors, okay, as opposed to RU6 having 96 resistors only. Okay, so which means that right now it is also, most importantly, the biggest selling factor for this RU7 is in fact being a 1-bit digital audio processor. So what does it mean? And then now when we look at this RU6, it says 24-bit. Okay, I'm just gonna say it out as how I understand things. All right, so everything that we see, pretty much like all these dongles here that you can see on my desk, right, they are pretty much 24-bit or even 32-bit. Okay, those are considered as multi-bit. Okay, but this R2R of RU7 is in fact a 1-bit technology, pretty much similar to, if you are familiar with, the old SACD player like Marantz or some Sony. Okay, they actually use 1-bit DAC for their CD player. And I remember those days when, going to, CD shops and to browse for CD, there's always one section for normal CDs, which is in PCM, CDs as standard, and there's another segment for SACD. SACD is pretty much the audiophile version of it, meaning that if you want to have a higher resolution or the highest resolution, you always go for ASACD because they come accompanied with, you know, higher level of mastering and recording. So that's pretty much the layman's term of how I understand it. But physically, this is how they differ. Okay, resolution wise, they are pretty much the same, max out at, you know, 384 kilohertz. Okay, fairly okay for PCM, and DSD 256, which is again fairly okay. And to be honest with you, I only use up to DSD 64. I don't even have any library which is up to DSD 256. Perhaps you have it, then RU7 can handle it. Okay. Another important part would be signal to noise ratio. Okay. Now let's just have a look here. The first one, okay, which is the balance spot. It offers pretty much a very average looking number, I would say, at just 112 dB of sensitivity. Because if you were to compare on some other dongle, especially Delta Sigma ones, all right, they go as high as 134 dB of signal to noise ratio, like this Luxury&Precision dongle here. All right. So, my manner of saying is that, just put it this way, actual usage and experience, as I have used this dongle extensively and many other dongles. In fact, I have dongles which are even lower than this, right? Anything above 100 dB of sensitivity would already sound very silent, okay? Perhaps it's the limitation of my hearing or my equipment, but I did subject this RU7 with highly sensitive hybrid IM some more, which is at around 8 ohm, very low sensitivity, above 120 dB. And safe to say that I am not hearing any kind of noise. So there's no cause for concern, at least from actual usage perspective, at this low number of 112 dB. So anything above 100 is already perfect for me. Okay. And if you can see, basically, in fact, RU6 is kind of a bit higher with the SNR, which means that it suppressed even more noise, supposedly. Okay. But to my ears, they sounded the same. Okay. And in fact, if you look at the single-ended, slightly different, meaning that there are supposedly even lesser noise floor on the single-ended, which makes sense because the 3.5 SE on this type of dongle are usually meant for highly sensitive IEM. But again, like I say, just put it this way. If measurement numbers is important for you, then perhaps RU7 is not the one. Okay, there are other dongles that will cater for that kind of needs. But if you want, right, simply functional and good working dongle with great sound, RU7 have it. Okay. And now let's talk about power. And this is very impressive. This is the only third, or should I say fourth dongle, which actually achieve 400 milliwatt of power per channel, okay, in any type of DAC in this form factor. Okay, so I can recall that the first one that I owned was Ovidius B1, which is this one, offer 410 milliwatt. And I also have this Centrance DACport HD, which is still the highest at 775. And I believe another one would be kind of like, I forgot the name, but it was damn powerful as well. But the key point is that you are getting 400 milliwatt of power at 32 ohm, okay? If you are using a device at 32 ohm, 400 milliwatt is what you're going to get. So as in comparison with RU6, from that standpoint alone, it's already giving you almost double the power, okay? And that is from the balance. And from the single-ended, we are looking at 160, okay, and 138 for RU6. So pretty much, I think from a human level of perspective listening, probably it doesn't make any difference at all, okay, unless you have a hearing like a dolphin or an elephant. Okay, now let's talk about the element of power of this RU7. So let's just have a look at the driving power itself, the loudness and stuff like that. Okay, so let's just have a look here at the chart. Let's talk about the sound itself coming from this RU7 in actual implementation, real life implementation. As you can see here, first, these headphones that you see here, Sennheiser HD 650, Fostex T40 RP MK3, and also this Hi-Fi-Man HE400 SE. All three are very difficult to drive headphones. So let's just have a look at the Sennheiser. This RU7, in fact, was quite effortless when it comes to driving even Sennheiser HD650, which is rated at 300 ohm at 103 dB of sensitivity. All right. And in fact, for proper listening, I just needed to set it at 54 out of 100, literally 54%. And in fact, that is pretty much equal to the performance of this iBasso DC04 Pro. So if I were to compare it against the rest of the competition, which I have recently tested, which is this Luxury&Precision W4, this thing is also rated at 400 milliwatt of power, in fact, slightly higher, 420. Okay, this W4 would need 70 out of 100, as you can see here. So what I'm trying to say is that, despite similarities in the specification itself, in actual implementation and usage, I have found that RU7 and DC04 Pro in fact offer a bit more of beef to the sound itself to achieve the kind of level of listening which is proper for this Sennheiser HD650. And pretty much similar also with the rest of the other two headphones. And in this particular case, let me just highlight this, my hardest to drive headphone among all three, which is this Fostex T40 RP MK3, right? 91 dB of sensitivity. In fact, I have to crank it all the way to 60 out of 100 on this RU7. And in fact, if you look at this Luxury&Precision, it is fairly okay as well, still under 80, which is at 77. And it is pretty much identical to the performance coming from DC04 Pro as well. So I can safely say that this RU7 definitely very well versed to drive all these three headphones which I have tested. No issue at all. Okay, so now let's just talk about the differences between these two ports that you can see here, which is the 3.5 mm single-ended and 4.4 mm balance. As you have seen earlier, the specification, the power rating for these two are different, even though they're coming from the same DAC. So let's just have a look. I have actually tested it extensively with this Final Audio A5000, which is my #1 favorite right now. Very efficient, 18 ohm in fact, and sensitivity thing around very high as well. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that for this combination, okay, while running on high gain mode, okay, this RU7 easily drive it at around 32 out of 100. And I would say that among the many which I have tested, this is probably one of the most powerful. Probably only beaten by this DAC HD in terms of sheer power when it comes to driving IEM. Okay, so in fact, if you were to compare with DC04 Pro, DC04 Pro needed a bit more, which is at around 36 out of 100. And Luxury&Precision W4 even needed at around 52 just to match the loudness. Okay, and pretty much the same here with 3.5 mm single-ended. Okay, and if you look at it, the thing is that the most important thing that I like to highlight here is that if you are driving anything under 32 ohm, and in fact I would even set it as a limit up to 24 ohm, all right, there's no difference in terms of sound quality in presentation if you were to use 3.5 or even 4.4 mm balance. Okay, the reason is that simple. Okay, it depends on the efficiency and the sensitivity of your IEM. For anything which is like this, right, very low ohm and very high sensitivity, all right, it can already actually be running at optimal. Okay, but if you do have something which is kind of a bit heavier, especially these three headphone here, then there is audible differences between these two. I can clearly hear that the expanse of the sound itself, the headroom, the authority of the dynamics itself is definitely improved when switching to 4.4 mm balance, especially if the attached partner is the type that scale very well with power. Okay, that's #1. What I'm trying to say is that if you have something like, a magnetic planar IEM, okay, for example, like KZ PR2, or even let's say this Tangzhou Heyday, which is my favorite, they are already efficient in a way, right, with two VRMS or relatively fairly powered devices, but they can actually expand or should I say scale really well with added power. Okay, but not all IEM behave that way, especially hybrids. Okay, because hybrids, which is already very sensitive, they tend to get shouty if you subject a bit more power to it. So perhaps it is best to stick to 3.5 mm single-ended. Now let's just have a look at another element of power which relate to power as well, which is battery drain. And perhaps I would just simply say this is the only cons that I can see with this RU7. Let's just step back a bit. Remember I mentioned just now that this is a miniaturized technology crammed into such a small form factor. R2R itself is already something which is exceedingly difficult to implement in small form factor. And now we are talking about 1-bit technology with 128 resistors crammed inside. So what we are looking at is something which is power hungry in order to deliver the sort of quality. So driving my phone, which is Xiaomi Mi 90 at 4000 mAh, using USB exclusive mode in Hebe Music, and driving 32 ohm IEM, and also it was on airplane mode. RU7 only managed to score 5 hours at best. Okay, and that is a repeated test. Okay, I have tested it many times just to make sure that I am seeing it right. Because if you were to compare the same sort of test done on the other dongle, DC04 Pro scored 9 hours. FC6 scored 9 hours as well. And in fact, Luxury&Precision score 14 hours. Okay. And Ovidius B1 here, my all-time favorite, score probably around 17 hours. And also DC03 Pro. So you can imagine the kind of power churned out, or should I say drawn by this RU7 in order to deliver the sort of quality that we are hearing. And in fact, another side element to it is that also if you are driving something which is relatively demanding, especially like when attached to my PC here, right? After a while, I can feel that the temperature kind of a bit, warmer than normal. In fact, I would even say that it is slightly warmer than RU6. But no worry, this thing here, DACport HD, is a lot hotter than this RU7. Anybody who owns this know that this thing can fry an egg, okay? All right. But I would just simply say that this thing will emit a bit of heat, especially if you are attaching it to highly demanding partners. The entire construction itself is pretty much similar to RU6, if you are familiar with RU6. That comes with this independent volume adjustment, very important. And I am just so happy to say that this thing provides 100 steps, okay? And there's just one simple button here, which is for the function. Now, let's talk about the function itself. I'm just not gonna dig too much into it because it's pretty much very simple. It is. The moment you press this, for a few seconds, what you're gonna get is that the opportunity to change high and low gain, okay? And then change the line out or phone out, which I will talk a bit more after this. And also the DSD mode from 64 to 256. I always set it to 256 because I expect the very best from this RU7. And of course, you can toggle the screen on and off. That's it. Very simple, but very usable. And then of course, if you are connecting it to the phone, I will always mention this to you, okay? Especially if you're using Android, please run it in USB exclusive mode. Either you use Hebe Music app or also UAPP. And the reason is that if you attach this directly to your phone and not running USB exclusive mode, you are just getting 70% out of the true potential of this guy. Okay. Forget about running anything else like DSD or anything like that, because higher resolution is not achieved if you don't use those special software. Okay, now let's talk about the line out mode of this RU7. As I mentioned earlier, this RU7 is capable of switching to line out mode. So especially if you want to drive and connect this RU7 to an external amplifier like this X-Duo MT602, or even this magnificent Venture Electronic Runabout 2BFE, okay, which has 4.4 line in. And of course, my ultimate electrostatic amplifier here, energizer unit for this KSE 1500. Okay, RU7 has it. All right, so that is definitely something which I really love. And let me just put it this way. All right, looking at the spec itself, the line out actually offer two different type of power. All right, if you are running it from the 3.5 mm single-ended, you're gonna have something which is rated at 1.2 VRMS. Okay, and if you're running at 4.4 mm balance in line out mode, you're gonna get a bit more power at 2.4 VRMS. And this actually, right, line out is definitely not to be used directly to headphones or IEM. Okay, it can hurt your ear. All right, because once you toggle the line out function, you cannot adjust the volume at all here. It just simply lock. Okay, and that is how it should be. So now let's just talk about the quality itself. Okay, so just gonna give this as simple as possible. RU7 is definitely superb when it comes to serving as a line out mode. Not many dongle has line out function. If I recall correctly, only two other dongle have that capability, which is the Muse Hi-Fi M3 and also the duo of Bluetooth Power S1 and S2. But I would say that the kind of quality coming out even from this 3.5 mm single-ended, which I attached to my electrostatic DAC amplifier here, it was just simply mind-blowing. The sound is just simply probably the best that I have ever heard listening to this KSE 1500. Okay, just to be fair, this Prime DAC is equally as amazing as this RU7 when it comes to serving as line out function. But then again, if you look at this Prime DAC, you see the size itself. This is a Delta Sigma dual DAC. Okay, this is a pure DAC, designed and built to behave like a DAC, pure DAC. But RU7 was able to match the sort of performance offered by that Prime DAC. So definitely, I would say that if you are looking into the smallest source, right, with the highest quality available, definitely RU7 has that. Now let's talk about the best part, the sound itself. Okay, how does this RU7 sounds like? So put it this way, one of the reasons that I love, and there's no hiding that I love this RU7, is for the fact that it is an R2R. And what is the big deal with R2R as compared to Delta Sigma DAC? You know, I love analog sound. So what does it mean by analog sound? Analog sound is just simply my definition or how I see it as being natural and organic sounding. And it is a reminiscence of some of the era which I remember. If you are familiar with high quality or hi-fi sort of sound when you are using vinyl or even SACD. Okay, so that kind of experience is kind of a bit, not in abundance nowadays because the tuning for most Delta Sigma DAC is kind of a bit a bit digital, at least to my ears. Okay, and I kind of like always prefer that natural and organic sound. Okay, and definitely I can safely say that RU7 is among the top performer when it comes to presenting that sort of sound. Okay, it is definitely analog, but also at the same time it is hi-fi. So what does it mean? It means that on the terms of technicalities, this thing have absolute control over every element of technicalities, anything from the resolution itself, right? From the transparency, from the neutrality itself. And when I say neutral, this RU7 does not add any kind of coloration or boosting to the sound itself. How it is fed with the kind of source, right? Especially if you're feeding it very high quality source like DSD, and running it in USB exclusive mode or even ASIO driver on your PC, you're going to hear every sort of resolution and details coming from that music file. Okay, so it has the ability to reveal all of those, definitely. And as opposed to that, using RU7 on lower quality source perhaps is not a good idea at all. For example, if you attach this RU7 to listen to something like, YouTube music, which is at best running at 256 kbps and most of them running at 128 kbps, believe me, you're going to be hearing a lot of artifacts, all right? So you're going to hear also all the imperfection in the mastering and in the compression of that source. Don't use RU7 on stuff like that, okay? You are buying this expensive dongle because you want to listen to very high quality source, okay? So that is definitely one thing. And another element of technicalities to the sound itself, okay? One of the biggest change which I have observed the first time when I listen to this, even when using my headphone here, is that how open the sound is, right? Among the many dongles that I have, not many that I can openly say that being open and wide sounding when it comes to the staging itself. First, the impression of the headroom, okay? The impression of the sound stage itself. It felt spacious, it felt airy, and it does not, present in any kind of, element of congestion or let's say lack of space, all right, for the better word of it. So without wasting too much time, let's just have a look at the rating for this RU7. There you have it, as you can see. Very impressive score. This is, in fact, I will show you later where does it stand among all of the competition. Okay, I have spent quite a lot of time on this RU7, okay. Probably now it's over 250 hours already. I have been using it on daily basis with different type of partners, with all kind of scenario, right? So definitely, I would say that it scores perfect 10 on item number 1 and number 4 when the sound aspect itself. Perhaps the only thing that it does not score perfectly is I feel that the note weight and density is not as rich as the rest of the competition which I have tested. But I will explain a bit more on that later. As with the rest of the thing that you can see here, the only one that is definitely not, very impressive looking is just power efficiency. Okay. Otherwise, this is one hell of an amazing dongle. Okay, another interesting part, comparison. So how does this RU7 compare against the rest of the competition, as you can see here? So many dongles. All right, let's just look into this table here, which I have prepared for you. Okay, now we already know that RU7 scores like this, okay? And probably you have also seen some of the score with some of the regular dongles I have. Okay, to be honest with you, okay, when it comes to comparison, this is the only dongle that score perfect 10 in everything, okay, when it comes to all these elements. DAC port HD. This is just simply one of a kind dongle when it comes to sound presentation. Until today, I cannot detach myself from DAC port HD because it is just simply perfect in that element from 1 until 7. So it suffers a bit on here. So sound wise, okay, remember that I mentioned to you earlier, when we look at the score here and compare it with RU7, note weight and density. I must admit that comparing side by side, this DAC port HD still has a bit of upper hand when it comes to the note weight and density. It simply means that the sounds appear richer, okay? Not necessarily colored, but it's just simply denser in the terms of the dynamic presentation itself, okay? Otherwise, with everything else, the technicalities and everything, perhaps I would just simply say that within the limit of my usage and my ability to listen, they are pretty much similar, okay? They operate on a similar level of the highest quality that you can expect from a dongle, okay? And of course, there are several other differences, but I think most importantly is that both of them score really bad when it comes to power efficiency at 6, because this DAC port HD is pretty much similar to this RU7 when it comes to draining the power from the host. Okay, that is the kind of thing that I have seen. And then, of course, another of my favorite, and in fact, I switch regularly between this FC6 here and RU7. Again, I must admit that this is the only second dongle out of 140 dongle which I have tested so far that scored perfect 10 in the sound element. And again, I would say that at least from my listening perspective, FC6 is still a bit superior when it comes to sound, note width, and density. It's just simply 1 point richer than RU7. Okay, but for everything else, definitely I would say that driving power RU7 has superiority. Okay, and they are pretty much similar when it comes to volume management, feature wise, and everything. Perhaps one of the most evident difference between this FC6 and RU7 is sound stage. Okay, I will admit openly that as much as I love this FC6, right? When I switch to RU7, one of the reasons that I switch to RU7 whenever I use the dongles is that because I want a wider sense of soundstage. This RU7 is just simply one of the widest sounding dongle which I have used so far. Very open sound. And in fact, in contrast, FC6 is kind of a bit intimate rather than narrow. I would not say it narrow. It is very open sounding as well, but not as wide. Okay, so that's probably one of the major differences between FC6. And then comparatively with DC04 Pro, as you can see here, right, they are also very close between this RU7 and DC04 Pro, but I would just simply say that when it comes to tone and timbre, RU7 does it better at presenting that natural analog sound. Both are already analog sound, okay? Make no mistake about it. I love the kind of natural smoothness coming from this DC04 Pro. But when I switch to RU7, I can kind of like sense a bit of improvement in that department when it comes to the tone and timbre balance. Okay. And then of course, with the rest of the competition, very easy. Comparing against i5 Go Bar. Okay. I just simply say that RU7 is definitely just a superior dongle in every area except for features. Okay. When it comes to comparison with i5 Go Bar. Okay. Simple as that. And then we also have this Questal M15, another dongle which I really like. Okay. Perhaps the biggest caveat that I have with this M15 is that it doesn't have independent volume adjustment. To me, it is such an important feature because independent volume adjustment will allow me to change the volume, especially when running on shuffle mode. Being able to fine-tune the volume on the dongle itself at very fine level of volume adjustment is super important to me, because with the right kind of volume, right, then you are getting the best output from any kind of sound equipment. So when we look at that, let's say tone and timbre balance, okay, I would say that M15 is definitely neutral. RU7 is also neutral, but the one thing that's lacking in M15 is that, it is a prime example of a delta sigma sort of clean sound. Okay, it does offer transparency. It does offer the kind of resolution and imaging and everything like that. Okay, which I love as well. I can really appreciate. But when I compare with RU7, right, I would say that RU7 have that element of, again, the keyword here, being analog sounding while doing the same thing. Okay, so that's perhaps the main difference. Luxury and Precision W4. These two are the main competition right now, right, in the market, because they are released at the same time. They are competing at the top tier price dongle. Okay, I have reviewed this. You can watch my full review on it. And the biggest differences between these two is definitely the tuning itself. Okay, as much as I love this W4, okay, I didn't actually use it that much because I always prefer, again, the keyword there, analog sound. Okay, it has a bit more of fluidity with the transient when it comes to, let's say, presenting that organic tone to the sound itself. Okay, and of course, the condition that, again, if you are the type of person who wants to have in the knowledge knowing that your DAC measures really well, perform really well on paper, W4 is the one to get, definitely. Okay, but to me, those things doesn't matter to me. What important is the actual listening experience. So it is not about right or wrong, right? It is about personal taste. Of course, last but not least, with Cayin RU6. As you can see here, the total score differences between RU6 and RU7 is just by 1 point actually. Okay, the overall score. But when we look at the sound aspect of it, I must admit that one thing for sure, when it comes to tone and timbre balance, RU7 is definitely an achievement, okay, of whatever RU6 has started. Okay, they are pretty much similar sound-wise, which is analog, organic, yet analytical. But I can sense that there's a bit of sense of refinement with the way the dynamics are being handled. Okay, and then of course the other two are pretty much the same. Okay, so this is the area which I think RU7 has improved quite a lot. Not to say quite a lot, a bit over RU6, because let me just put it this way. Okay, just because there's now RU7 does not mean that suddenly RU6 become a bad dongle. No, it is already an amazing dongle. If you have RU6 in your hand right now, you are not missing that much compared to this RU6, RU7 here. Because the improvement, the main difference between these two, first, again, I already mentioned when it comes to the tone and timbre balance there, okay? And then another thing is that the sound stage, okay? If soundstage is important to you, you feel that RU6 does not offer wide enough soundstage, then the solution is definitely RU7. And if you need line out, okay, again, RU7. And now let's talk about the sound and timbre presentation of all these dongle, which I have shown you earlier, all these different dongle. So as you can see on screen right now, I have kind of like devised this graph to give you an idea. Okay, one side we have here analog sound and one side we have hi-fi sound. So when it comes to, let's say, for example, Luxury and Precision W2. Luxury and Precision W2 is in fact a prime example of a perfect Delta Sigma DAC. Okay, it is definitely very hi-fi when it comes to sound. Okay, and we have W4, the latest one, and I would say that it is still hi-fi, but it offers a bit more of that edging towards being organic sounding as well. So, which is in fact, to me, from my perspective, is a very positive thing. Okay, and pretty much the same can be said for this M15, because if I were to compare them both, they're pretty much similar in the way they handle the dynamics, the sound itself, everything. Okay, and as you can see here, the exact opposite of the Bluetooth is in fact heavy FC6. This is in fact the most analog sound of all the dongle that I have. It is in fact, more analog sounding than DACport HD or even OVDS B1. Okay, so it is absolutely at the max here, being analog sound, but it does not sacrifice on the element of being analytical and technical. So this is definitely my number one still. Okay, and we also have here iBusso DC04 Pro, all right, performing fairly well, hovering heavily towards being analog as well. And we have here DACport HD, I already mentioned, it is in fact almost perfect, okay? And this is where both RU6 and RU7 stands. It is in fact just two steps away from being fully analog, according to my standard. The rule of diminishing return. Okay, so for example, comparing between this DACport HD and RU7, it would probably take me half a day just to pick up the nuances. All right, and that's the keyword there, nuances. All right, they are both already outstanding in their own way, and pretty much the same can be applied if I were to be comparing this RU7 with W4 here. Okay, aside from the obvious differences which I have mentioned to you earlier, they are already performing at a very top level. So, but the key thing is that what is the biggest appeal of this RU7? To me, RU7 is definitely the very best among the very best when it comes to R2R implementation in this form factor right now. In fact, you don't get many of them, just 3 in the market right now. So my recommendation is that if you are new and you want to experience analog sound properly, it's either you get this RU7 or you get this FC6. But let me just put it this way, all right? The limitation of this FC6 is that it only has 3.5 mm single-ended, which does not bother me, but I do know that some people would prefer to have 4.4 mm balance, okay? And also the most important thing, this RU7 has the very best line out option for you to connect to an external DAC amp, or should I say amplifier. It is just simply amazing, all right? Whatever sound that's coming from this RU7 is just pristine, as how I would put it, okay? Thank you for staying with me until the end of the video. If you have any further question, which I have not covered, or anything that I have missed, just leave a comment under this video and I will reply as soon as possible. So you have a great day there.